Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've heard this story at least 20 times, and it never gets old because of how perfectly it backfired on my dad. We're Muslim and pretty conservative, coming from a very traditional village. Modesty is a huge deal for us, and there are clear boundaries between men and women. Flirting or even looking at someone inappropriately is heavily frowned upon in our community. This whole thing happened in Saudi Arabia when it was even more conservative than it is now. At the time, my parents had 3 kids, my older sister who was 5, me at 3, and my little brother who was only 2. My mom was also heavily pregnant with another baby and dealing with a tumor in her left leg that made walking really difficult. She always describes how she walked back then as like a seal, tripping over myself. So picture this poor woman, pregnant, in pain, trying to keep track of 3 young kids in a busy mall. We were all out shopping together as a family. In Saudi Arabia back then, pretty much every woman wore a black abaya that covered them completely, even their faces. So the mall was basically a sea of women dressed identically in black from head to toe. Then this one woman appeared, walking toward us from the opposite direction. She stood out like a siren in this conservative environment. Her abaya was completely unbuttoned and unzipped, showing off fitted leggings underneath that highlighted her figure. She was wearing stilettos that made these loud clicking sounds with every step she took. Her hands were covered in bracelets that jingled and chimed like little bells when she moved. In a place where blending in was the norm, she was impossible to ignore. That's when my dad made the biggest mistake of his life. He started singing this Arabic song under his breath that translates to "She walks like a deer, the walk of a maiden." Now, considering my mom's condition, pregnant, struggling with a tumor, walking like she described it, this song was obviously not about her. My mom stopped dead in her tracks and turned around to face him. She demanded to know what he just said. My dad immediately went into defensive mode and said that the words just slipped out without him thinking about it. My mom shot back that if it slipped out, it meant that was exactly what he was thinking about. She was getting more upset by the second. Now my dad had the nerve to act like he was the victim in this situation. He told my mom that he was never taking her to the mall again, as if she was the problem. My mom was furious at this point and told him he sounded ridiculous. She pointed out that he was the one flirting with another woman while his kids and pregnant wife were walking right beside him. Then she made a promise that would haunt him for years. She said she would let the whole world know about what he had done. Dad probably thought she was just angry and would forget about it. He had no idea what he had unleashed. A few days later, we traveled back to our home country. Now, you have to understand something about villages. Word travels faster than wildfire. My mom made good on her promise and told everyone she could about what happened. And I mean everyone. In our society, especially back then, what my dad did was considered really inappropriate and embarrassing. For the next 2 months, my dad went anywhere without someone singing that same song to him. People would greet him by singing about how someone walks like a deer with the walk of a maiden. It became like his personal theme song, except instead of making him feel good, it reminded him of his humiliation every single time. Random villagers would see him and immediately burst into the song. Neighbors would ask about his family and then launch into the familiar tune. Even kids in the village picked it up and would sing it when they saw him. My dad was completely mortified. Everywhere he went, someone would start singing that cursed song. He escaped it. Then we moved back to Saudi Arabia. My dad was friends with his co-workers there, and naturally their wives were friends with my mom. My mom being my mom, she resisted sharing the story. She told them about what had happened 2 months earlier and proceeded to tell the whole embarrassing tale to the other wives. Of course, they went home and told their husbands all about my dad's mall incident. The next day, when my dad went to work and opened the office door, his co-workers immediately started singing in unison about deer and maidens. My dad was so embarrassed he immediately called my mom from the office and begged her to please stop telling everyone about the incident. But my mom done with him yet. She reminded him that she had promised to humiliate him over this, and she meant every word of it. And she has kept that promise for 17 years now. Every single time my mom meets someone new, this story comes up. It matters if it's a new neighbor, someone at the grocery store, or even our relatives who visit. She finds a way to work it into the conversation. She'll tell new acquaintances about the time her husband embarrassed himself at the mall by singing about another woman. The poor person has no choice but to listen to the entire story, while my dad either tries to change the subject or just accepts his fate. When meeting new people, my mom will ask if she ever told them about the time my husband behaved inappropriately at the mall. My dad will just sigh deeply and prepare for another retelling. What makes it even funnier is that my dad has tried everything to make her stop. He's apologized countless times, bought her gifts, promised to never look at another woman again, but nothing works. My mom has turned this into her personal entertainment system. The story has evolved over the years too. Now she adds dramatic gestures when she tells it. She'll imitate how the woman walked, making exaggerated clicking sounds with her shoes. She'll sing the Arabic song in a mocking tone while looking directly at my dad. Sometimes she even asks the person she's telling it to what they think about my dad's behavior. She'll ask people if they can believe her husband had the audacity to sing about another woman right in front of her. When people respond awkwardly and know what to say, she'll continue by telling them how he then tried to make it seem like she was the problem. Watching my dad's face during these retellings is entertaining. He goes through all the stages, first hoping she bring it up, then realizing she's about to tell it, then sitting through the whole thing while people either laugh at him or give him disapproving looks. At family gatherings, it's become a tradition. Someone will inevitably ask my mom to tell the mall story, and she's always happy to oblige. My siblings and I have memorized every detail because we've heard it so many times. Even our extended family has gotten in on it. My uncles will randomly text my dad the song lyrics. My cousins have made it into jokes at weddings and family events. It's become this legendary story that follows him everywhere. The funniest part might be that after all these years, my mom still finds new audiences for the story. She's told it to doctors, teachers, shopkeepers, and random strangers in waiting rooms. Each time she acts like she's never told it before and gets genuinely excited to share it. Recently, she even told it to our new neighbors during their welcome dinner. The poor woman knew what to say when my mom finished by declaring that now she knew what kind of man her husband was, while my dad just sat there eating his food like nothing happened. What's really incredible is how this one moment of poor judgment on my dad's part has given my mom 17 years of ammunition. Most arguments between married couples get forgotten, but not this one. This has become the gift that keeps on giving. My dad has learned to just accept it at this point. When my mom starts by mentioning something that happened 2 months ago or asks if she ever told someone about an incident, he knows exactly what's coming. Sometimes he even helps her tell it by filling in details she might have forgotten. When my mom gets to the part about him singing, my dad will actually recite the lyrics about walking like a deer. My mom will confirm that's exactly what he sang and ask the listener if they can believe such behavior. It might not sound like much to outsiders, but in our conservative society, this level of public embarrassment is actually pretty significant for my dad. And that's the story of how my dad learned that, in our family, some mistakes echo for decades. During my teenage years, I was known as the kid who could fix anything, from broken bikes to old radios. This knack for problem solving led me to pursue a degree in mechanical engineering. College was a challenging yet exciting journey that pushed me beyond my comfort zone but prepared me for the real world. After graduation, I landed a job at a renowned engineering firm in the city. The work was demanding but rewarding, and I quickly climbed the corporate ladder. But when the years passed, I longed for a place where life moved a bit slower and neighbors knew each other by name. So when an opportunity arose to transfer to a smaller branch of my company in a quiet suburb, I took it. That's how I found myself in this charming neighborhood reminiscent of my hometown. I purchased a cozy house at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a decent backyard that was next to a small wooded area perfect for my dog to run around in. The move was a breath of fresh air. I spent my weekends exploring local hiking trails and getting to know my neighbors, who welcomed me with open arms. I even started a small side project, refurbishing old furniture, which rekindled my childhood love for fixing things. But not everything in this neighborhood was what it seemed. The neighborhood was under the watchful eye of the Homeowners Association, led by Karen, the neighborhood diva. From the moment I moved in, Karen saw me as an outsider, a person who came to disrupt the careful balance she had created. And so I found myself in an unexpected battle, one that would test my patience in ways I never imagined. Early on, Karen had her eyes on me. She'd walk by my house, clipboard in hand, jotting down notes about everything she found displeasing. But here's the surprising part. I wasn't even part of her homeowners association. My house was just outside its jurisdiction, something I had confirmed before buying the place. But that didn't stop Karen. Fines started appearing in my mailbox, but I ignored them, of course. I wasn't going to be bullied into compliance, especially by someone who had no authority over me. Karen would knock on my door, demanding payment. I stood my ground, reminding her each time that I wasn't part of her homeowners association, but she wouldn't listen. One day, I decided to work on my garden. Gardening was my way of relaxing, and I took pride in my colorful array of flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. When I was planting some tulips, I heard the unmistakable clack of Karen's high heels on the sidewalk. I looked up to see her approaching with her usual stern expression. I greeted her politely with a good morning, but she immediately launched into complaints about how I was violating homeowners association rules again. I sighed and set down my gardening tools, explaining once more that my house wasn't under the homeowners association's jurisdiction and asking what the problem was this time. She pointed an angry finger at my garden and declared that my flowers weren't approved by the homeowners association and were bringing down the neighborhood's look. I laughed when I told her these were just tulips and reminded her that her rules didn't apply to my property anyway. Karen warned me that I was making a big mistake by going against the homeowners association and threatened to make things very difficult for me. I replied that I wasn't going against anyone but simply doing what I was free to do on my own land. She stepped closer and promised that I would regret this decision. When I asked if that was a threat, she told me it was a promise before turning around and storming off. I watched her leave, having no idea how far she would actually go to keep that promise. It was this encounter among several other encounters with Karen, the Homeowners Association president, that really built up to that one horrific day when everything went to hell. It seems almost unbelievable now, but each incident felt like another brick in a wall of mounting frustration. Karen would come by almost daily to complain about my lawn, telling me my grass was an inch too long, while waving those homeowners association fines in my face like they were legal documents. Then there was a time she had a fit over my mailbox, claiming it wasn't the right shade of gray. I remember laughing at that complaint because it seemed so ridiculous. The holidays were no different. I put up some lights and decorations to get into the festive spirit, but Karen saw it as a personal attack on the neighborhood. She threatened to tear them down herself, saying they were too fancy for the neighborhood's standards. I can go on, but I'll stop here. You just need to know that each of these encounters was like a small flame slowly heating the pot of our interactions. And eventually it all boiled over that day she showed up at my door with a gun. After a busy morning of work, I was at home taking a break with a cup of coffee. The engineering project I've been working on was finally coming together, and I felt satisfied with the progress. That's when I heard a knock on the door. Expecting a delivery, I opened it, only to find Karen, a very angry version of Karen. I greeted her with a polite good morning, but she immediately demanded to know if I would finally pay up for my last ignored fine. I simply told her no, which made her declare that it was time I learned to respect the homeowners association. Once again, I explained that I wasn't part of her homeowners association, but she angrily asked if I thought I was above the rules and above her. She reached into her purse and, to my horror, pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at my head. The metal gleamed in the morning sunlight, and I felt my blood turn cold. I desperately told her to put the gun down and that this was completely insane. Karen screamed at me to go get her money, calling me names and demanding I do it right away. Her voice was shaking with rage, and I could see she had completely lost control. At that moment, fate intervened. A police car patrolling the neighborhood turned into my street. The officers inside the car noticed the situation at my doorstep and the weapon in Karen's hand. In a flash, they were out of the car, drawing their weapons and shouting for her to drop her weapon. Karen, caught off guard, turned towards the sound, her gun still in hand and now pointed at them. The officer commanded her again to drop the weapon, making it clear he wouldn't ask a third time. Karen, finally realizing how serious the situation had become, slowly lowered her gun. The officers quickly moved in, handcuffing her and reading her rights. I stood there shaking when they took her statement and then mine. I explained to the officers that I'd had problems with her before, but I never imagined she'd go this far. The officers nodded with understanding, saying they'd dealt with homeowners association disputes before, but nothing quite like this. When they led Karen away, my neighbors began to gather, watching the scene with shock and concern. They knew Karen's reputation for being difficult, but no one had expected her to take such extreme action. The trial of Karen culminated in a more severe sentence than I had anticipated. The prosecution presented a strong case, highlighting not only the immediate threat she posed, but also her pattern of harassment. After the judge heard all the evidence, including her illegal possession of a firearm and the gravity of her threats against me, the verdict was delivered. Karen was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a fine of $5,000. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. Karen looked pale, and I could see the reality of her actions finally sinking in. Her lawyer tried to argue for a reduced sentence, but the judge was firm in his decision. In the wake of Karen's sentencing, the Homeowners Association convened to elect a new president and board. The community was eager to move forward and heal from the chaos Karen had created. The new elected president was a soft-spoken man who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade. He made it clear that the Homeowners Association's role was to serve the community, not to police it with an iron fist. And I can say that he delivered on that promise. He approached me one evening while I was working in my garden and invited me to join the Homeowners Association. He was quick to add that there was absolutely no pressure and they'd just love to have me with them, explaining that their goal was to work together rather than impose rules. I thanked him for the offer, but told him I would have to decline. He said that was perfectly fine and let me know I could find them if I ever changed my mind. He didn't push the matter at all, which I greatly appreciated. In the months that followed, the neighborhood transformed. The new Homeowners Association leadership focused on organizing community events and maintaining common areas rather than nitpicking individual properties. Neighbors began talking to each other more, and the sense of community that had been stifled under Karen's reign slowly returned. My own life settled into a peaceful routine. I continued my engineering work, which became even more fulfilling knowing I could come home to a place where I truly belonged. My side project of refurbishing old furniture grew into a small local business, and I found myself helping neighbors with various repair projects around their homes. The wooded area behind my house became a favorite spot for evening walks with my dog. My daughter's father and I were never in a relationship. We had a one-night stand when I was 27, and when I found out I was pregnant, he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with it. He actually pressured me to terminate the pregnancy, but I decided to keep the baby since I was financially stable and always wanted to be a mother. For the first 4 years of my daughter's life, her father was completely absent. My mother always said I should try to include him, so I would send photos on birthdays and holidays, invite him to important events like her first steps or preschool graduation. Every time he would respond with the same message, he had no interest in being involved. Then 2 years ago, everything changed. Out of nowhere, he contacted me demanding parental rights. When I refused, he took me to court. The judge denied his request for custody, but offered him a path forward. If he paid child support, we could revisit giving him actual parental time. He refused to pay a single dollar, even though he makes significantly more money than I do. I felt bad for my daughter, thinking maybe she deserved to know her father, so I offered him casual visits with clear boundaries. I told him he could see her occasionally, but I would handle all legal, medical, and educational decisions. He agreed at first, but then started overstepping constantly. He would try to make medical appointments without telling me, questioned my parenting choices, and even suggested changing her school. After several arguments, I cut off contact completely. We didn't hear from him for almost 6 weeks. Then, right before Christmas, he called begging to see my daughter for the holiday. After a lot of back and forth, I agreed on one condition. My daughter's godparents had to come with us. They're like family to us, and I needed backup in case things went wrong. On Christmas Day, we arrived at his house expecting a simple dinner. Instead, I discovered he was married and had never told his family about my daughter. The looks I got from his relatives made it clear they were judging me harshly. I felt completely ambushed, but my daughter seemed excited about the Christmas decorations, so I decided to stick it out. His wife was immediately strange with my daughter. She kept calling her by the wrong name, not even close to her actual name. She was also incredibly physical, constantly trying to pick her up, fix her hair, or tell her what to eat. Every time I tried to redirect my daughter or handle something myself, the wife would push past me or ignore what I said. The whole family acted like I wasn't even there. They kept referring to my daughter as if she belonged to them, asking her questions about school and her favorite things while completely excluding me from the conversation. I was getting more uncomfortable by the minute, but my daughter wasn't acting scared, so I tried to be patient. Then my daughter announced she needed to use the bathroom. Before I could respond, the wife jumped up and said she'd take her. She called my daughter by the wrong name again and offered to change her diaper, even though my daughter has been potty trained for years. I immediately stepped between them and told the wife that my daughter could handle going to the bathroom alone and didn't need any help. The wife insisted that my daughter was just a baby and needed assistance. She kept reaching for my daughter while I blocked her completely. I told her to stop touching my child and announced that we were leaving immediately. The wife started crying hysterically, actually wailing like someone had died. She screamed that I couldn't take her baby girl and accused me of kidnapping her. She actually lunged toward me, trying to grab my daughter. Her father-in-law had to physically restrain her while she screamed. Instead of addressing her behavior, the whole family started comforting her. They told me that no one was leaving and that I was upsetting her. They acted like I was being unreasonable instead of protecting my child. I turned to my daughter's father, who had been silent this entire time. I told him he better explain what was happening right now, or I was calling the police. He asked if we could talk privately and suggested leaving my daughter with his parents for a few minutes. I told him absolutely not and said we would talk right there, right now. He pleaded with me to step outside with him, saying his wife was going through something difficult. I looked at my daughter's godparents and told them to take her to the car. Her godfather cheerfully asked if she wanted to see if there were any good songs on the radio. When they walked out with my daughter, the wife had a complete meltdown, screaming that we were stealing her child. I followed him outside and demanded he start talking immediately. He explained that his wife and he had lost their daughter 6 months ago. It was sudden, a medical condition nobody saw coming, and she had been struggling with the grief. I told him I was sorry for their loss, but asked what that had to do with my daughter. He said he thought if his wife could spend time with my daughter, maybe call her by their deceased daughter's name sometimes, it might help her heal. He admitted that was why he wanted visitation rights. I stared at him in complete shock and asked if he was telling me he wanted to use my child as a replacement for his dead daughter. He insisted it wasn't like that and said it would just be temporary until his wife felt better. Then he would send my daughter back to me and everything would go back to normal. I asked him if he wanted me to let his mentally unstable wife pretend my daughter was her deceased child and then just return her when they were done playing house. He told me I didn't understand the pain of losing a child and said this could really help his wife. I agreed that I didn't understand that pain and hoped I never would, but I explained that what his wife needed was professional therapy, not my daughter. I told him I would not let him use my child to enable his wife's delusions. He accused me of being cruel and said they just needed a little time with her. I made it clear that my priority was protecting my daughter, not fixing his family's problems. I told him to call his lawyer because I was making sure he never came near my child again. I walked back to the car where my daughter was happily singing along to Christmas music with her godparents, completely unaware of what had just happened. When we drove away, I could see his wife standing in the doorway, still crying. Since then, he has been calling and texting constantly, alternating between begging and threatening legal action. I've saved every message as evidence. My daughter and I are currently on a small vacation, staying at a beach resort where she can play in the sand and forget all about that awful Christmas. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.